In today's episode of Not Nice Clever, we are talking to you about how to create content with consistency, which Kat and I understand can sometimes be a challenge. But if you create a few systems in your life and in your business, creating content with consistency becomes much easier. So, we wanted to break down some of our best nuggets that we share with our clients when it comes to getting consistent online so that you can be in front of even more people every day and build those relationships and do even more business. So let's dive in.
Yes. And you guys know, we might have shared this on prior episodes, but I know Candace and I have talked about it too. We know how important consistency is, but we also know that we don't want you to burn out. And we also want you to be very excited about the fact that you have all these platforms at your disposal. So let's make it fun, let's make it potent, but also consistent. So our first tip that we're sharing is not revolutionary, but we're going to share some tips to how to make it fun is by slowing down long enough to actually plan and have a content calendar in place. Now, if the term content calendar makes you feel overwhelmed or you're like, oh my God, I have to come up with all these brand new things, like 30 days worth, a quarter's worth, just think in terms of the content for the week. I did this on Monday yesterday. It was one of the few things I did because I was it's that time of the month, y'all, and I was not in a good mood. But I basically looked at my brand pillars, and I have three of them. And I looked at my brand pillars and I made sure that I had some sort of content around each of them. So I wasn't thinking about posting every single day. I wasn't thinking about hitting a specific, I was like, let's share one thing around each of the pillars. That way it's reflective of my brand. And I made two of them a reel and one of them a carousel. And so just taking that 30 or so minutes on Monday to provide notes for my social media manager, to make sure that it was aligned with my brand and business goals, and planning ahead so that all I had to do was tweak a caption or provide some b-roll. It made it really easy. It probably saved me way more than the 30 minutes that I took on Monday to plan ahead. So if you don't want to do a whole monthly calendar, weekly, starting there can be pretty approachable. So that's how I've adapted it for me. Candace, I'm curious because I don't think we've talked about this recently. How do you do your content calendar planning with your social media manager?
So, right now, we typically look at the next month. So, we look at the next 30 days basically and say, where are we? But I feel like this is low hanging fruit that people don't take advantage of is typically on your Google Calendar, wherever you keep all of your appointments, you have things that are coming up already. For example, Kat and I know we're both going to sell it in New York. So I know that I'm going to create content around that event. So I'll go in my calendar for September and say, sell it is on the 20th. So on the 20th in the evening or in the 21st, I'm going to do a recap of sell it because I do a recap for pretty much every event that I go to. And so I know that you likely have many things in your calendar right now, and you haven't thought about how to make those events into content that positions you as an expert, shows you with credible humans in your industry, and helps you to continue to grow and evolve. And so that's where I like to start by really just saying, what am I actually doing? And how do I write that down in my content calendar so I remember to make something to share with the world about it? And it could be as simple as I work with a lot of real estate agents, as you know. And so if you are having an open house, great. That is a piece of content that you can create and share on that day. When you begin to think about your content in terms of the things that are already scheduled in your calendar instead of like this thing that you have to make up out of thin air, content creation becomes much more simple because it's not taxing when you're just literally sharing what you're doing.
One of my favorite reframes that I know we have shared on here and that we have spoken about at events and we're always sharing with clients is to really think about your content as a form of documentation and sharing, almost as if you were like a sociologist and not like this creator that has to whip things up out of thin air, right? Your calendar is a form of content. The conversations you're having with clients, a form of content.
I know that someone's like, okay, but literally, Candace, what does a content calendar look like? And so
Okay.
I just want to start there.
Nuts
You
and
can
bolts.
have a pad of paper and a pencil, and you can make your content calendar, and it can be written, and you can tape it up on the wall in your office, and I am absolutely fine with that. Or you can use a tool such as Metricool or Planoly, both online tools. You can create an account and actually digitally keep your content ideas or your content calendar together if that's more your vibe. Additionally, you can use something as simple as a Google spreadsheet. Put some dates on a spreadsheet and then put the topics that you want to talk about and then the type of content that it should be. Is this going to be a photo, a carousel, a reel? Identify that. That's going to be really, really helpful. I think sometimes people get too caught up in like, you have to use this fancy tool. And
Mm-mm.
I don't really care if you use a fancy tool or not. I just want you to post, and then maybe eventually you'll decide to use a fancy tool. But it doesn't really matter to me where you start. I'm totally fine if you do it on your notes app in your phone, on a piece of paper. It's all fine. Some post-it notes. I don't care. Just want you to like get it out of your mind and onto either a digital page or a actual page and follow it.
Yeah. The question that we get a lot is often, what is the best X for X? And we're like, well, the best whatever is the thing that you are actually going to use. So if you are a pen and paper gal, I'm not, but I actually envy people who are, because not envy, but I admire people who are, because scientifically you're more likely to remember things that you're writing down. So if you're thinking, you're listening or watching this right now and you're like, but a paper calendar, that's so old school, that's so no, you're actually more likely to remember that. So that might be more effective for you, especially if you can see it every single day in your office. But also the Google Sheets. Like, there are free Google Sheet calendar templates that you can just copy and paste into your Google Drive, and then boom, you're done. When I had my creative agency, that was what I did. I set up the next 3 months of content calendars for each of my clients, literally using those same templates. And it worked, because Google Sheets is great for collaborating. So if you have a team member who helps you, or you just need to be able to share it, that makes it really easy, better than a paper calendar. But again, there's no right or wrong way. It's the way that gets you, like Candace said, to post. Because remember what the end goal is here. It's not to have a
Yes.
pretty project management tool. It's to connect with the people through your content, right? That's
And
the goal.
I've also had clients who have like beautiful entire dashboards that are incredible
Yes. We love that
that
for
they never
them.
look at, that they never
Well,
open, that they never
that
actually
too,
use.
because we
So,
work with busy entrepreneurs
yeah,
and they like,
so
ain't nobody got time for that.
I'd rather you just do whatever you're more likely to use and look at, whatever is easier for you.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Okay. Next tip. This was the tip before we rolled it back and got super granular, which I'm glad that you had us do that, because it's always good to remember that not everybody is where we are. I feel like this was a hot topic a year or two ago, the idea of batch creating content. And this is where, like, I walk the line of being potent and energized and excited, or being consistent. And so I would say the idea of batch creating content, which batch creating your content means that you have a block on your calendar or a set time every other week, or even every week for however long, to specifically just record, right? Or capture content. Now, while I think that sounds great in theory, record all of your content for the month in 3 hours. But we work with busy people. And to your earlier point, your calendar is content, and people want to go along on the journey with you, which is super effective, right? Into building that emotional connection. So I would recommend, how I've used it and I've seen it impactful, is if you have a specific type of content, specifically like FAQ content, where you're answering questions that your clients are asking you, that you can record in one sitting and record like 5 to 10 of those all at once. I do that in my own content, and it's where I'll capture questions from my clients or even like Candace, the conversations that you and I have, and I'll have my social media manager record her asking those questions. And then I'll sit down in my little chair, which you can't see here on the screen, but I'll just literally sit there. I'll hit play. She'll ask me the question and then I'll just respond. And it's so easy because I'm really good at responding to things. Most people are, right? They're terrified if they're just like looking at the camera and they're like, what do I say? But I recorded 5 of those in like 20 minutes the other day. And there we go. She shares one a week for the next 5 weeks. I did that in 20 minutes and she takes care of the editing and we collaborate on the caption. But that type of batch content has worked really well for me. And so I would recommend with this tip against trying to batch everything that you put out there. What do you think, Candace?
I think once again, it's one of those things that depends on who you are because I know Glenda Baker crushes it and she just
Oh,
records content, I think it's once a
bow
month, right?
to the queen. Yes.
And so I think it just depends on your personality. Now, me as an introvert, I have a finite amount of energy to be used at any given time. And so if you're asking me to create content for even more than an hour, I'm like, deuces, I'm out. Like, this is too much.
Yeah.
My energy is gone. And then I have that like weird blank stare and I just can't fake it. So
Yeah.
that doesn't work for me. So once again, I think it depends on who you are. What I found to be most helpful and what I'm currently doing today is I put 2 blocks in my calendar that say content creation time. And depending on my vibe on that day at that time, it might mean I am writing down my ideas for content, or it might mean like, oh my gosh, my hair looks good and I'm feeling myself and I am going to hit record. And I just do whatever makes sense for myself at that moment. But I do have the time blocks in my calendar to remind me that this is the time that you need to focus on your business and your content and not everyone else's business and everyone else's content. So I think that is key to me, is just making sure you have those times blocked. In addition to that, I am inspired regularly by my conversations with my clients, my conversations with you. And so I might be heated about something that someone said that annoyed me, and I'll be on my way to Starbucks in the car and hit record and do a little rant and post that.
Mhm.
So I do also take inspiration by everything that's going on in the world and hit record for a minute because everyone has a minute
Mhm.
to be able to share that. And so I'd say I have like a hybrid content planning where, yes, I have an intention of batch creating, but I also create on the go and on the fly.
Yeah. And we've found that too with our podcast and like in determining like our best recording rhythm. Like we've got a recording block and a planning block on our calendar every week. And even though we're talking about the medium of a podcast, the idea of content creation and blocking time for it still applies. And I remember when we were planning for me to be abroad in Japan and then you to be abroad in Italy last year, we recorded what like 2.5 months ahead. And we found that the episodes, the content didn't have as much like stickiness, as much like aliveness. Like it showed in the data, it showed in the DMs. And so we're like, okay, like let's get like a month ahead. But anything too far in advance, it loses that relevancy. It loses that we're not just like sitting here like waxing poetic. Like we're actually responding to things that people we know are struggling with. We want it to be of value.
Right. Okay. So tip number 3 for maintaining consistent content. So far, we have create a content calendar and batch create content when it makes sense. Basically, time block for content, I think, is the key point there. And then lastly is automation tools. And this is really helpful if you are leaving on a trip and you still want to be consistent. You can use an automation tool to help you schedule out your content. So I use Metrical right now, and I don't schedule my content very far ahead of time, maybe a week, if that.
Same.
But I might be like, oh, it's too late in the day to post this, but I want to post it tomorrow morning. So I'll use Metrical and go ahead and schedule a post there. So that's
Mhm.
super easy and free. So definitely check that out. Planoly is another option. I even think Canva now has a
They
option.
do.
Yeah.
I did
So
see that recently. Yeah. And like the same thing with like deciding what CRM to go with or what type of content calendar. It's like try them all out, see which one is the easiest to use, the easiest to understand, and the most cost effective. And that's usually the one that you go with. And Metricool is very simple. It's lightweight. It was easy to set up. It's easy to understand the analytics for me. So I can go in and scan it like on a weekly basis, be like, oh, like that drove a lot of traffic to the website or that drove downloads. Like, cool. Like, let's do more of that. And so don't ask us which one's the best because we found the one that's best for us. We invite you to find the one that's best for you and just know that you can't really make the wrong choice, but that even just using something like this is going to save you time, which is money as a busy entrepreneur. And we're just here to help you avoid that.
I will say one thing that I like about using something like a scheduler is that you typically have your captions all in one digital place.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that because sometimes if you are using paper to plan your content, you're typing your caption into Instagram and then there's no way to copy and paste captions on Instagram. So you can't go back and like
Right.
copy it and do anything with it. I like all of my captions in one space because then I can drop my captions into ChatGPT and say something like, "Hey ChatGPT, make me 10 threads from in my voice using this as inspiration for the content because since I already wrote them."
Mm.
And then dropping them there and it'll spit out 10 threads or literally anything I want, make a newsletter with this content. And it'll do that as well. So I like having my captions digitally accessible somewhere. So keeping them in Metricool or Planoly is really helpful.
All right. So we've shared some tips about maintaining consistent content. Now, for the introverts in the audience and even the extroverts, because everyone, if you're human, is prone to burnout in some way, some form, some fashion. And we've gotten this question a lot. How do you avoid burnout in content creation? Because content is a marathon, brand building is a marathon. It is not a marketing campaign, might be a sprint, but the overall act of it is a marathon. And so avoiding burnout starts with first understanding your capacity. And you had kind of alluded to this earlier, Candace, about you've got your 2 blocks on your calendar each week. And like that's getting the job done. And it's also not pulling you in too many different directions. And I love that too. I don't operate with blocks on my calendar, but I do know, and my social media manager knows this too, like she's getting 5 hey cats out of me and once and that's it. Like if I try to force myself to do any more, it's just I feel like it's like forced and I'm trying to like pull it out of me. And even when I go like live, I can't go live more than like 20 minutes, like sitting there and interacting. And so I think and this is something that you have to like really be self-aware about and what are your limits and also what helps me in avoiding burnout is taking time to like digitally detox. Like I don't go on social on Sundays. Like that's usually like kind of my day of rest from like digital, physical, all of that. And then even after a certain time of night, like I won't go on too, because even just being plugged into it does drain your energy, even though
Yeah.
you're not creating. Like I know you're pretty good about those boundaries too. Like, but you kind of just I don't know. It depends. You have to figure out what it is, but take a detox time, right?
Take a detox. Do not be afraid to literally take a vacation from your social media. It's going to be there when you get back waiting for you. And so I don't see there being a problem taking time off. I'm going on vacation in a couple weeks and I will likely unplug for a little bit or I'll only post when I'm inspired, when I not because I feel obligated, just because I want to. And I think that
Right.
that's also a different energy. So if you're posting only because you feel obligated, then it might be time for you to take a digital detox. And when I say a digital detox, I'm talking about even from consuming. Like,
Mhm.
don't consume content. I want people to create more than they consume. That's my goal for everyone. And if you are feeling stuck in content creation, then stop consuming for a little bit and see if your creativity comes back to you. And
Mm.
also, I use the word creativity right now, which is funny to me because some people are like, "How are you so creative?" I'm like, "I don't think I'm a creative person, like at all. I think that there's not any creativity in me. I just think that I am interested in
I
branding.
think you're
I'm
curious.
interested. Maybe
I
curious
think
is it.
I think
Yeah.
curiosity might be a better word here. Like we really think on it. We reflect, we analyze, we go introspective. That
And
is
I
where a lot of
think
my
that
ideas come
might
from too.
be helpful to the person who's sitting there being like, I'm not a creative person. I can't create content. Well, I don't think you have to necessarily be creative. I think you have to be observant and
Mhm.
curious and know something that you are excited to share. That's literally it.
Yeah. I I love replacing creativity with curiosity because then I think people do realize how creative they really are. One thing that helped me kind of put more boundaries in place, right? Because burnout is like you're kind of just you're giving too much. You're pouring from an empty cup, right? And so I always like to think of it like where am I like leaking energy or leaking attention or leaking focus? And one thing that I did, I don't think I even told you this, Candace. This was like a couple weeks ago. I got a new iPhone and I changed it so that I don't get any mobile notifications for any social media apps. I have to open the app
Oh
to
yeah.
see
I've never
notifications.
I've never got notifications for social media apps. I can't.
See?
Nope.
And but like I've gotten to the point, like, thank goodness personal branding's working. Like I've gotten to the point where it was just too much. So if you're feeling like that, if you're feeling like forced, obligated to like respond and look here and this and that, like turn it off
Hmm.
on mobile. Game change. It has been a game changer for me. I was usually pretty good at like only having it seen in like the notification center on my iPhone, but now I don't see it at all unless I open the app. And I
Yeah.
only open the app like a couple times throughout the day. And my team knows to like message me in Slack if they like need me to respond to something or they see something that would be fun for me to respond to, right? And that's it. It's so nice. Your guys aren't going to miss anything. By the way, nobody will also notice you took a break. Like you're so precious
Right.
in that you think that
Yeah.
like people in their busy lives are going to notice you were gone for 7 days off of social. They don't. They don't notice.
Yeah.
People
So
have
true.
busy lives, right?
So, next up is prioritizing value. We care more about you giving actual value that's going to help your ideal client than being online every single day. So, I would recommend that if you are like, how often do I post? Which is also a question, Kat, that we haven't answered yet because we know that the Clever Crew is asking. You
Yes.
don't have to post every day. If you are not consistent yet online, I tell my clients to pick 2 or 3 days a week to post, and that is good enough to start.
Mm.
2 or 3 times a week, pick one of those numbers, whatever one you can stick to, and
Yeah.
start that now. Do that for 3 months. And when you can do that for 3 months, you can layer in another opportunity to share more content. That's fine. But you don't need to share content every single day, and you don't need to be on every single platform. What you do need to do is make sure that your content, like Kat likes to say, is potent, like it is providing value to your audience. And then also, I want to remind you that sometimes value is just entertainment. It
Right.
doesn't have to be
Relatability, making people not feel alone.
right. That is absolutely value, and it doesn't always have to be value in the form of education.
Yeah. That is an important point. There is so many different types of definitions of value, and I think understanding how your ideal client defines value is important. Like obviously, you do want to be seen as an area of authority to solve their business problems, their on paper problems. But what about their off paper problems of feeling alone, feeling exhausted, feeling they feel I had a client tell me this the other day. She's like, "Am I crazy to think that I have something of value to offer? Like, and I'm putting all this energy and time and money into building my brand." And I was like, "You're not crazy. You're not." And like that's me just saying that super valuable. I'll follow with some actionable like recommendations, but I'm like, "You're
Yeah.
good. You're not crazy."
Well, every human wants to feel seen, heard, and valued. That's it. So if you can make someone feel seen with their content, like you get them,
Mhm.
goes a long way.
All right. Last bit of tips that we're going to share here. We kind of already alluded to it, which tells you that we're always aligned here with
Mhm.
the episodes we want to share, but overcoming creative blocks. So, when it comes to brainstorming new ideas, coming up with fresh ideas, I think starting with not feeling like you need to be creative, but being curious. is
And
super
also
helpful.
knowing that not every idea needs to be new,
Huge.
right? It's just maybe you saying the same thing over and over again. And my favorite brand to think about when I think about this is Nike. Because no matter what we are watching or what magazine ad we're looking at, Nike is talking about just doing it,
Mhm.
performance, pushing yourself. Like that's what Nike's talking about over and over. It doesn't matter where you are getting the content from Nike, whether you're on Instagram, you see a commercial, it's on print. You know what Nike is talking about, the same damn thing. And
Mhm.
you should be talking about the same thing too.
Yes. This is where, like, the earlier example of having like 3 pillars in your content and sticking to that, not 8, not 23. And another analogy that I love to use is thinking for the parents in the audience, or even the aunts and uncles in the audience, of like when you are with your children or your nieces and nephews and you're teaching them how to do something, do you try to teach them a million different ways of how to do the same thing? Like, no, you have to repeat yourself. You're like, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this is how you do it. This is how you ride the bike. This is how you write your letters. This is how you do all of this. It's like you're doing the same thing with building your brand and communicating with your audience, and teaching them how you can help them and how you're going to connect with them. Repetition is not boring. I feel like people think repetition is boring, but
Right.
repetition is,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. That's how you build, that's how you grow. And obviously, as you have more experiences and you have more knowledge, your message will naturally evolve
Yeah,
because you have new experiences to share. But I don't want you to get caught up in this cycle of like every single thing has to be something you've never talked about before.
right. Like that's the novelty is not useful
Right.
here.
Yeah. Catch any one of our episodes. We probably said the same
How
thing.
many times in this episode have we said, "Oh, and I think we shared this on a prior episode," but like,
Yeah.
you're welcome again. Be potent and like,
Exactly.
man. And this next tip is perfect. I recently
Yes.
started doing this. Do you want to share this one, Candace?
Yes, repurposing your content, making sure that you are using your content across multiple platforms when it makes sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I have a client that I was on with yesterday, and her mind was blown because she's starting a YouTube channel. And then, so we have like all these, tasks for her to get her YouTube channel up and running. And then she
Mm-hmm.
was like, and I know you want me to do a newsletter, Candace. You want me to send that once a month, but I have no, what would I even put in that newsletter? I was like, how about your YouTube video that you created? Like you can write a paragraph about what's in the video and like, hey, want to learn more? And link to the YouTube video. And so we're just creating like this web where people are kind of getting caught in all of your content because no matter where they go, they see you. And then guess what? At the bottom of your newsletter is also your Instagram and they can click on there and it's all just
It's like
connecting.
Disneyland,
Yes, it's like Disneyland exactly. We're all just
content
going to
Disneyland.
go back around to your content and consume and consume and consume. And that is the goal. And like her mind was blown. She's like, oh, I could do that. Of course you could do that. It's your content. And we should be trying to capitalize on all of the things that we're already doing.
And by the way, for those of you in the audience wondering if you're going to get caught repurposing content, you won't. I've done it so many times. And in fact, those are my highest performing pieces of content because why? Because I've repurposed something that already worked
Or
and I did it
literally posting the
again.
exact same thing. Yeah.
Or
Like,
literally the exact same thing. Cause I know you've done that.
oh
Like,
my gosh. I have like this is the best little content story ever.
mhm,
I was going to Inman in New York and my social media manager pulled my analytics from the month before and she said, hey, Candace, this was your best video from last month. And I think I had like 7,000 views. And it was a
mm,
video clip of me on stage. And I was going to Inman. And at Inman, I obviously want to connect with people. Inman is a real estate conference, one of the largest ones in the country. And it was in New York. And I obviously want to connect with people who also are hosting events and are looking for speakers because I'm a speaker. So I'm like, oh, that's a good clip. It was my best one from last month. Let's post it while I'm at Inman meeting all of these new people because we're following each
mhm.
other on Instagram. We're
It's the
DMing
first
each
impression
other,
they're going to
right?
see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm creating Instagram story content like going to Inman, can't wait to see you guys. And I'm talking to everyone who's about to go to Inman, which guess what? If I'm talking to them already, Instagram knows, hey, they're friendly, they're friends. The next time Candace posts, we're going to put that in front of them. That's how Instagram works, y'all.
DMing people and responding to people's stories prioritizes your content in their feed.
Yes, exactly.
Guys,
So if I'm
yes.
on my Instagram story being like, I'm headed to Inman, who else is going? And then I put a poll and then everyone's like, I'm going. And I'm like, oh my gosh, can't wait to see you. Can't wait to see you. Ooh, I'm excited. Oh, here's a picture from us from last time we were at Inman. Whatever, right? And then my social media manager posts the exact same reel, same caption. We did not change one thing.
I
I
love
got
it.
1,000,000 views.
This was the Kylie one?
1,000,000 views
I love it.
from the same second time I posted it.
Yeah.
How crazy.
Repurposing things that already worked will probably work better the second time around, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth. Like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just give it a tune up and then send it on its way.
Or you can also just look at patterns, right? I know that every time I post a green screen reel, it does better than all the other content that I post. Just by looking at the data every time.
See, that's interesting because I've been experimenting with green screens. I think I'm actually supposed to post one later today. But for me, it's the Hey Cat content, the long form, which you know how people are always saying, like, oh, you can't do long form. Long form is dead. Short form is the way to go. Analytics don't lie. So it's so.
Well, it's still considered short form content because it's not long. It's like still under
That's
90
true.
seconds.
It's like a minute and a half.
Yes.
Yeah, a minute and a half ish, right? But like that's compared to like you hear
7 seconds
what everybody
Instagram,
says, right? Yeah, 7 seconds, this and that. It's like, well,
that's why it's important for you to look at your own analytics and see what your audience is connecting to. So you can do that on Instagram in the app, or if you use something like Metrical, you get even more in-depth analytics. All right. Lastly, you got to stay inspired. What are some tips, Kat, for staying inspired?
Surround yourself with inspiring people who you're actually excited to consume their content. I have nothing, like, as creators, like, we're not civilians in the content world. Like, I like to use that analogy, but I still consume. And in fact, one of my favorite types of accounts, okay, here's a tip that, like, you guys might not think that I'm going to say. One of my favorite accounts to follow, and I know you follow them too, Candace, because I've seen you leave comments on their reels, is this couple out of LA. And the wife's name is Alexandra and her husband's name is John.
They
they
do
not in LA
couples
anymore,
humor.
but
I love them. Oh my gosh,
did they move to New York already?
I can't remember where they moved, but yes,
okay, yeah, to be like back with family, right?
Yes,
so
John and Alex,
right? John and Alex, they're so good, so
and they
relatable.
have a podcast too.
They do. Give it to me straight, right?
Yes, so good.
By the way, guys, this is branding in action right now, literally, as we're anyway. But I love watching their stuff because it's real life. It's not in my industry. It kind of just allows me to like get out of the weeds of like the stuff that I'm talking about every day and to think of something in a different way. And it makes me laugh, makes me happy. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with me furthering my branding expertise. It's just me watching them, fantasize about how they murder one another because they love each other, but they also like, they're like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my tip. What about you, Candace?
Definitely consume content outside of your industry and then surround yourself in real life with other people who are creators. That's always going to keep you inspired. And you need people who believe in content to be around you. And sometimes that's hard, especially if you're just starting out. If you're around people who are like, "Oh, why are you wasting your time with that?" Or "You're too old for that," or
your
like,
head's
"You
in
look
the
cringy,"
phone,
or
like what's
whatever.
going on?
Exactly. You don't need any of that. So I'd say surround yourself with creators and follow people outside of your industry and get inspired.
Well, we hope that you have enjoyed this episode of content creation mixed in with some consistency. And before we sign off, we would love to give a shout out to one of our clever crew who was kind enough to leave us a review. This is by Meg Nels. So Meg, shout out to you. She said, if you're looking for a podcast that's up to date on all things social branding and content, you have to check out the Not Nice Clever podcast with Candace and Kat. I love how they bring major value, but also entertain me while I'm listening. You won't get bored. Oh, we hate boredom. I hear you, Meg. I highly recommend you add it to your list. Thank you, Meg, for that amazing review. And if you enjoyed and got value out of this episode, we'd love it if you pop on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review with your thoughts.
Thanks for joining us on Not Nice, Clever.
Remember to follow Not Nice Clever wherever you listen to audio.
And if you haven't already, drop that 5-star review.
Share your takeaways. Tell us your story. We love to hear it.
Signing off, your not so nice, but oh so clever besties that mean business.
See you soon.